Imagine holding a piece of volcanic glass in your hand, its surface so smooth and dark it feels like a frozen pool of midnight, reflecting not just your own image, but centuries of untold stories. This is obsidian, a material born from the heart of volcanoes, forged in fire and cooled into a substance so sharp it could slice through history itself. For generations, archaeologists and historians have been captivated by this mysterious glass, not just for its utility as a tool or weapon, but for something far more profound. Ancient civilizations across the world saw obsidian as more than a resource. They saw it as a canvas for their most sacred knowledge, a medium to encode everything from celestial patterns to spiritual wisdom, ensuring that their discoveries would endure long after their cities had fallen into silence. From the sun-drenched temples of the Maya to the rugged highlands of ancient Anatolia, obsidian was treasured, traded, and transformed into objects of both practical and mystical significance. Its glossy, reflective surface became a portal to the divine, used in rituals of divination, protection, and communication with unseen realms. But what if these artifacts held even deeper secrets? What if the intricate engravings, hidden markings, and deliberate arrangements of obsidian were part of a sophisticated system of knowledge preservation, one that we are only now beginning to understand? In this video, we will journey across continents and through time to explore how lost civilizations encoded their greatest insights into this volcanic glass, blending science, art, and spirituality in ways that continue to astonish researchers today. With the help of cutting-edge technology, we are finally peeling back the layers of these ancient mysteries, revealing a level of ingenuity that challenges everything we thought we knew about the past. Each shard of obsidian tells a story of astronomers tracking the stars, healers mastering their craft, and storytellers preserving myths for future generations. This isn't just a tale of forgotten techniques, it's a testament to human creativity and the timeless desire to leave a mark on the world. So join us as we uncover the secrets etched in obsidian and discover why these whispers from the past matter now more than ever in our quest to understand who we are and where we come from. Born from the heart of a volcano, obsidian begins as a river of felsic lava, a type of molten rock rich in silica. When this lava meets the air or water and cools in a geological instant, sometimes in a matter of hours or days, it doesn't have time to form a crystalline structure like other stones. Instead, it solidifies into a smooth, homogeneous volcanic glass. This incredibly rapid cooling process is what gives obsidian its most famous characteristic, conchoidal fracturing. This is a technical term for the way it breaks into pieces with incredibly sharp, curved edges, much like a shard of a broken bottle. For ancient peoples, this property was nothing short of miraculous. With careful knapping, they could fashion edges sharper than even the finest modern surgical steel, creating blades that could cleanly slice through flesh, wood, and fiber with astonishing precision. This wasn't just a useful material, it was a technological leap, the cutting-edge tool of its day that revolutionized hunting, crafting, and daily life for countless cultures. The value of this volcanic glass meant that its sources became hubs of immense activity and cultural significance. Across the globe, from the highlands of central Mexico to the mountains of Anatolia in modern-day Turkey, specific volcanic flows were sought out and often controlled by powerful city-states or religious orders. The Maya, for instance, had extensive trade networks radiating from sources like El Chayal and Ixtepec in Guatemala, moving tons of this material across vast distances into the lowlands. Similarly, the Aztecs revered the mines of Pachuca, which produced a distinctive green-gold obsidian, and they even had a patron god for it, Tezcatlipoca, whose name translates to smoking mirror. His divine insignia was often a disk of polished obsidian, underscoring the deep spiritual connection these cultures felt toward the material. It wasn't just a commodity, it was a substance with a soul, a piece of the underworld brought to the surface. This spiritual dimension is key to understanding why obsidian became so much more than a simple tool. That glossy, jet-black surface, when polished to a high sheen, becomes a mirror, a portal to another world. In countless ancient societies, from the Aztecs to the ancient Chinese, these mirrors were not for vanity. They were instruments of divination, used by priests and shamans to scry into the future, communicate with ancestors, or see into the unseen realms of the gods. The reflective surface was thought to capture light and shadow in a way that revealed hidden truths, making it a powerful object for protection and prophecy. This duality, a material that could both sustain life through its utility and connect to the divine through its mystique, made it the perfect medium for encoding knowledge. It bridged the everyday and the eternal, the practical and the profound. By understanding both its fiery birth in the earth and its sacred role in human culture, we can begin to see how a simple piece of volcanic glass could become a canvas for the most important secrets a civilization wished to preserve for the ages. Among the most visible and captivating ways ancient peoples encoded their knowledge into obsidian was through the art of symbolic engraving. Far more than simple decoration, these intricate carvings transformed a piece of volcanic glass into a sacred text, a spiritual battery, and a historical document all in one. The Mesoamericans, in particular, elevated this practice to an astonishing level. Aztec priests, for instance, were known to use beautifully polished obsidian mirrors in their divination rituals. But upon closer inspection, many of these mirrors reveal a secret layer of meaning. Finely etched symbols along their rims or across their backs. These weren't random scratches, they were precise inscriptions of calendrical dates, representations of deities like Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, or icons depicting significant astronomical events like the movement of Venus. The true genius of these engravings lies in their function. In a society without widespread literacy, these symbols served as powerful mnemonic devices. A priest holding such a mirror during a ceremony wouldn't just see his own reflection blurred by candlelight. His fingers would trace the carved glyph for a specific day in the ritual calendar, triggering the memory of the exact chants, offerings, and actions required for that occasion. Another symbol might represent a specific star constellation, providing a portable reference guide for tracking its position throughout the year. These artifacts became compact, durable repositories of essential knowledge, ensuring that complex information could be accurately passed down from one generation of specialists to the next without being diluted or forgotten. The craftsmanship required to achieve this is frankly mind-boggling. Obsidian, for all its sharpness, is an incredibly brittle and unforgiving material. One misplaced tap or a fraction too much pressure, and the entire piece could shatter into useless fragments. The artisans who created these engraved masterpieces possessed a profound, intimate understanding of the material's properties. They likely used tools made from even harder substances, like diamond or perhaps other slivers of obsidian, applying minuscule amounts of force to gradually incise lines finer than a human hair. This wasn't mere craft, it was a technological art form, a testament to a level of skill and patience that we still struggle to fully comprehend today. By meticulously studying these symbols, modern archaeologists are essentially learning to read a language written in stone and spirit. Each engraved pattern is a window into the ancient mind, revealing not just what they knew, but how they thought. A series of dots and bars might decode a sophisticated mathematical system. A recurring animal motif could unlock beliefs about spiritual guides or clan identities. In this way, these obsidian artifacts functioned as one of humanity's most durable hard drives, preserving the core values, beliefs, and intelligence of a culture for centuries, silently waiting for us to learn how to read their messages. But the story of obsidian's hidden language doesn't end with what the naked eye can see. If we zoom way in past the realm of visible engravings, we enter a secret world of microscopic inscriptions, a form of ancient steganography where knowledge wasn't just recorded, but deliberately concealed. Imagine an Olmec priest carefully passing a seemingly smooth, unadorned obsidian blade to an acolyte. To the untrained eye, it's just a tool, but the priest knows its true nature. Etched onto its surface, in lines finer than a spider's silk, are patterns and dots completely invisible without aid. This wasn't just art, it was a protected channel of communication, a way to encode sensitive information meant only for the eyes of the initiated. Modern science has become our key to unlocking this hidden dimension. Using powerful tools like scanning electron microscopy, researchers have been able to peer into the micro-world of artifacts from great centers like Teotihuacan. What they've found is astonishing. Faint grids that may have mapped out trade networks connecting distant cities, sequences of dots that could correlate to lunar cycles or planetary movements, and intricate geometric patterns that might have served as encoded summaries of complex religious teachings. This information was so valuable, so sacred, that it had to be protected. By hiding it in plain sight on an object that appeared utterly ordinary, ancient leaders and scholars could safeguard their most crucial knowledge from those who were not prepared to understand it. The very existence of these micro-inscriptions forces us to completely rethink the technological capabilities of these cultures. Creating such precise details on a material as hard and brittle as obsidian would have required more than just a steady hand. It suggests the possible use of magnifying tools, perhaps bowls of water or naturally formed crystal lenses that could focus sunlight to a fine point to delicately score the glass. Alternatively, it points to a level of lapidary skill so advanced that artisans could feel imperfections at a microscopic level, using abrasives and endless patience to gradually wear these hidden messages into the stone. This wasn't crude experimentation, it was a highly refined, secretive technology. This method of encoding reveals a sophisticated ancient mindset that understood the power of information and the necessity of controlling its flow. The choice to use obsidian for this purpose is particularly brilliant. Its dark, glossy surface is terrible for revealing these tiny scratches under normal conditions, making it the perfect medium for a secret code. Only under the intense, focused light of modern laboratories do these whispers from the past finally become audible. Each discovered micro-inscription is a testament to a dual legacy, a profound desire to preserve knowledge for the future, and an equally powerful need to protect that knowledge, ensuring that only those with the right understanding could ever hope to read it. Moving beyond the secrets held within single objects, ancient cultures also orchestrated knowledge on a much grander scale, using carefully choreographed arrangements of obsidian artifacts to transform entire spaces into cosmic instruments. This wasn't about hiding information, it was about creating an experience, a dynamic performance where the knowledge was revealed through the interplay of light, shadow, and stone at specific moments in time. At the magnificent Maya city of Capon, in present-day Honduras, archaeologists made a stunning discovery within a ceremonial precinct. A cache of meticulously crafted obsidian blades was found positioned not for storage but for a purpose. Their placement was precise and intentional, angled in such a way that they would catch the rays of the rising sun during the equinoxes. those 2 days of perfect balance between light and dark in the year. When the sun crests the horizon on those specific mornings, its light would strike these polished black mirrors, and they would act like a network of primitive projectors, casting defined beams or brilliant points of reflected light onto specific markers on temple walls or onto the floor of a dark chamber. Imagine the profound impact of this in a ritual setting. A priest or a group of initiates would be gathered in the dim interior of a temple. As the sun rose, a sliver of light would appear, then another, gradually painting a predicted pattern of spots and lines across the room, perhaps illuminating a carved symbol of a deity or tracing the path of a serpent on the wall. This was knowledge in motion. It encoded a sophisticated understanding of astronomy, proving they could accurately predict solar events years in advance. It demonstrated a masterful grasp of geometry and the physics of reflection, knowing exactly how to position each blade to achieve the desired optical effect. And it blended this hard science with deep spirituality, creating a powerful, multi-sensory ceremony that didn't just tell people about the equinox. It made them feel it, live it, and witness the divine order of the cosmos made manifest in their sacred space. This practice of ritualistic arrangement extends far beyond a single site. Across ancient Mesoamerica, caches of obsidian eccentrics, those incredibly elaborate, non-functional blades shaped into gods, animals, and geometric forms, are often found buried in specific numbers or patterns that align with calendrical cycles. A group of 20 might represent the number of days in a Maya month, while 4 arranged at the cardinal directions could invoke the 4 corners of the world or the 4-year bearers of their calendar. The material itself was chosen for its symbolic weight. Its volcanic origin connected it to the underworld and creation myths, while its reflective quality bridged the earthly and celestial realms. By reconstructing these intricate setups, we come to understand that for these cultures, knowledge wasn't meant to be static information locked away in a book. It was a living, breathing force that could be harnessed, performed, and experienced. They used the unique properties of obsidian to build a bridge between the measurable movements of the heavens and the intangible realm of faith, creating an encoded language of ritual that spoke through alignment, light, and celestial time. Perhaps the most sophisticated form of encoding moved beyond the surface of a single material, weaving together different substances to create composite artifacts where the very combination of elements told a deeper story. This wasn't just about decorating obsidian, it was about integrating it into a multi-layered symbol, where each material contributed its own voice to a richer, more complex message. A stunning example of this is the Aztec Tezcatlipoca mirror. This wasn't a simple disc of volcanic glass. It was a masterpiece of composite artistry, a perfectly polished obsidian surface set into an elaborate frame that could be made of gold, intricately carved wood, or even turquoise mosaic. The frame itself was often a tapestry of symbol serpents representing the god Quetzalcoatl, skulls denoting the underworld, or stars mapping the night sky. The genius of this object lies in the deliberate synergy of its materials. The obsidian, with its dark, reflective quality, was the smoking mirror itself, the portal to the unseen, the tool of divination that allowed the priest to peer into the spirit world. It represented mystery, the unknown, and the power of prophecy, but the frame provided the context. Gold, a metal associated with the sun and with royalty, spoke of ultimate power, divinity, and the highest social status. A frame of jade, a stone linked to water, fertility, and life itself, would have conveyed a different but equally potent message about creation and sustenance. By combining them, the artisan wasn't just making a beautiful object, they were encoding a theological and social statement. This object declared that true power, Tezcatlipoca's power, was a fusion of the mysterious, unseen forces of the spirit, the obsidian, and the tangible, radiant authority of the divine ruler, the gold. These composite objects served as three-dimensional textbooks of ancient knowledge. The choice of materials, their proportions, and how they were assembled could encode precise information. A mirror with a larger proportion of gold to obsidian might signify it belonged to a higher-ranking priest or was used for a more important state ritual. The way different colored stones were inlaid around the mirror's edge could tell a condensed version of a creation myth, with each color representing a different era or deity. Deconstructing these artifacts allows researchers to understand not just what ancient peoples valued, but how they categorized their world. The knowledge wasn't just scratched on the surface, it was built into the object's DNA, into the very relationship between its parts. This method reveals a holistic way of thinking, where meaning was derived from the combination of elements, teaching us that for these cultures, understanding came from seeing how things connected, not just from examining them in isolation. The story of obsidian's hidden language extends far beyond engravings and arrangements into the very essence of its visual character, its color, and its captivating interaction with light. This volcanic glass is not a monolith of simple black, it is a spectrum of natural artistry. From the deep, impenetrable jet black that feels like staring into a starless night, to the reddish-brown swirls of mahogany obsidian that resemble frozen cinnamon, and the rare, ethereal rainbow varieties that shimmer with iridescent bands of color when struck by light, each type was a distinct medium for ancient expression. Cultures didn't just use whatever obsidian was handy, they made deliberate, symbolic choices. For the Aztecs, the classic black obsidian was intrinsically linked to Tezcatlipoca and the underworld, making it the premier choice for rituals involving divination, ancestor communication, and themes of death and spiritual rebirth. In contrast, the fiery red or mahogany obsidian, often rich in iron oxide, was symbolically tied to blood, sacrifice, and the vital force of life itself. A surgeon's blade used for a bloodletting ceremony intended to nourish the gods would be far more potent if crafted from this red-hued stone, its color visually encoding the very purpose of the ritual. But the manipulation went deeper than simple color selection. The real magic happened when skilled artisans polished these surfaces to a high, mirror-like gloss. A perfectly polished obsidian disc is more than a mirror, it's a projection device. In the hands of a knowledgeable priest or storyteller, this object could transform a dark chamber into a canvas for light and shadow. By carefully angling the mirror to catch the flame of a single torch or a beam of sunlight entering through a temple portal, they could project intricate patterns, dancing points of light, or even suggestive shapes onto walls or smoke. These light shows weren't mere entertainment, they were a dynamic form of encoded storytelling. A flickering pattern might represent the chaotic void before creation, while a steady, focused beam could symbolize the first dawn or the path of a celestial deity. The narrative was no longer static, it was alive, changing with the movement of the light source, making abstract cosmological concepts visually tangible and emotionally resonant for the audience. Modern experimental archaeologists have built replicas to test these theories, and the results are breathtaking. They've demonstrated that by using multiple obsidian mirrors or blades arranged at specific angles, ancient practitioners could create complex, coordinated light patterns that would have appeared nothing short of miraculous to observers. These projections could serve as mnemonic triggers, visually reinforcing the key beats of a sacred story being chanted by a priest. They could also encode more direct information. A specific pattern of light spots might correspond to a particular star cluster, serving as an astronomical aid. This practice reveals a sophisticated, intuitive grasp of optics, understanding angles of incidence and reflection, and how to manipulate light to serve a higher communicative purpose. The obsidian object itself became a kind of ancient projector, its dark, flawless surface providing the perfect contrast to make these light patterns stark and clear. This method of encoding knowledge through color and ephemeral light underscores a holistic ancient world, where aesthetics, science, and spirituality were not separate disciplines, but were woven together into a single, powerful tool for preserving and transmitting the most important truths of their culture. Now, let's shift our focus from the visual to the auditory, to a method of encoding that resonates not in the eyes, but in the ears and the soul. We often think of ancient artifacts as silent objects, but what if some were designed to speak? Or more precisely, to sing? This brings us to the fascinating and often overlooked realm of sonic encoding. It's a concept that might seem surprising at first. After all, obsidian is a glass, and we don't typically associate it with music. But when you take a finely crafted obsidian blade and gently strike it, or run a finger along its edge, it can produce a clear, high-pitched ring, a distinctive ping that is unlike the sound of any other stone. This unique acoustic property, a product of its homogeneous glassy structure, did not go unnoticed by ancient artisans. Consider the ancient Minoans of Crete. In their elaborate palace complexes, archaeologists have uncovered carefully worked obsidian cores and blades in contexts that don't clearly point to utilitarian use. They weren't found in kitchen areas or with butchering remains, but rather in central courts and rooms that likely hosted communal gatherings and rituals. Could these objects have been part of a ritualistic orchestra? It's a compelling possibility. Imagine a ceremony under the Cretan sun, where the rhythm of drums is punctuated by the sharp, clear chime of an obsidian blade being struck. This sound, rare and difficult to produce, would have instantly commanded attention, perhaps signaling the arrival of a priestess or marking the climax of a sacred story. The sound itself becomes a signal, a non-verbal cue encoded with meaning, triggering a specific emotional or ceremonial response from everyone who heard it. This idea finds powerful support through ethnoarchaeology, the study of modern traditional societies to understand past behaviors. In parts of Papua New Guinea, where the use of obsidian continued into the modern era, certain groups attribute special significance to the sounds their tools make. The act of knapping a new blade isn't a silent process. It is accompanied by a series of specific percussive tones. Some craftsmen could even tell the quality and size of a core just by the sound it made when tapped. This auditory feedback was a form of embedded knowledge, a way of understanding the material that went far beyond the visual. Furthermore, in some North American indigenous traditions, flint and obsidian blades are described in stories as having voices, and their sound in a ritual context was believed to be the voice of the spirit within the stone speaking to the community. The choice to use obsidian for this sonic purpose adds another layer of meaning. Its sound is sharp, clear, and brittle, much like the material itself. In a ceremony, the ringing tone of an obsidian instrument could be used to mimic the sound of cracking ice, falling rain, or even a shattering universe during a creation myth. This multi-sensory experience would make the story more immersive and unforgettable. The knowledge being transmitted wasn't just a list of facts, it was a feeling, a memory anchored by a unique sound. This practice shatters our silent perception of the ancient world, revealing a reality that was vibrant with meaningful noise. It shows us that knowledge wasn't only meant to be seen, arranged, or touched, it was also meant to be heard, using the clear, ringing voice of volcanic glass to ensure that certain messages would echo through time. Now let's consider the most common obsidian objects of all, the everyday tools and weapons that filled the lives of ancient peoples. we might assume a simple arrowhead or a scraping knife had just one job to do, but many of these utilitarian objects hold secrets that go far beyond their obvious function. This is the world of functional encryption, where the most ordinary items became subtle carriers of coded information, embedding knowledge into the very fabric of daily existence. Take, for instance, the highlands of Papua New Guinea, where the use of obsidian continued into the 20th century. Ethnographers documented that men crafting blades would often add a series of small, precise notches along the base, a detail that served no practical purpose in cutting or hafting. Instead, these marks acted as a signature, identifying the maker's specific clan or village. In a region with complex social alliances and trading partnerships, that tiny pattern transformed a simple tool into a passport, a declaration of origin that everyone in the trading network could recognize and understand. This practice of embedding identity into tools has deep archaeological roots. At a site in ancient Mesopotamia, a cache of obsidian blades was discovered, each featuring a unique, microscopic series of scratches near the hafting point. Under normal use, this area is typically worn smooth from being bound to a handle, so these pristine, deliberate marks were clearly applied after the tool was made and meant to be preserved. Researchers theorize these could denote the owner's status, perhaps a number of successful hunts, a specific military rank, or membership in a particular guild of craftsmen. A hunter might carry a knife that silently boasted of his skill, while a warrior's spear point might indicate his battalion or chief. In this way, an object that appeared identical to any other to the untrained eye was in fact a detailed resume, a form of prehistoric identification badge worn on the business end of a weapon. The encoding could also be far more personal, relating to the object's spiritual journey rather than its owner's social standing. Some Native American traditions from the Great Basin area describe the process of heart-breaking a fine obsidian point. Before a hunt, a prayer would be offered, and a tiny, almost imperceptible flake would be snapped from the tip of the arrowhead. This wasn't damage, it was a deliberate ritual sacrifice, a way of giving a piece of the point's spirit to the gods in exchange for their favor in guiding it to its target. To an archaeologist, that broken tip might initially look like a manufacturing error or later damage, but understanding the cultural context reveals it as a profound encryption of faith, a physical manifestation of a prayer for success, and a respectful plea to the spirit of the animal about to be hunted. The flaw was in fact a feature, encoding an entire worldview about reciprocity between humans, their tools, and the natural world. This method powerfully demonstrates that the drive to encode meaning wasn't confined to temple treasures and priestly rituals. It was a democratic impulse woven into the most common materials of everyday life. A simple obsidian scraper used to clean hides could also tell you who made it, who owned it, and what they believed. This ubiquity made obsidian a truly democratic medium for communication. It meant that knowledge about identity, status, belief, and skill was constantly being communicated, silently and efficiently, in every handshake of a trade, in every communal task, and in every preparation for the hunt. The story of human ingenuity wasn't just written in grand monuments. It was etched into the edge of a well-used knife, ensuring that even the most functional objects spoke volumes about the culture that created them. Moving beyond the individual object, we find that ancient peoples often encoded their most profound messages not through the artifacts themselves, but through the silent language of their placement. The precise location where an obsidian item was deposited, and the company it kept, could speak volumes, transforming a simple tool or mirror into a powerful word in a spatial sentence. This method of spatial encoding turns the entire archaeological site into a text to be read, where every burial, every cache, and every foundation offering contributes to a larger narrative. Consider the ancient city of Çatalhöyük in Turkey, one of the world's earliest known proto-cities. Here, archaeologists have made remarkable discoveries beneath the plastered floors of tightly packed homes. Individuals were buried in sleeping positions directly under the platforms where the living family would have slept, and alongside them, nestled as grave goods, were often beautifully crafted obsidian mirrors. This wasn't a random act of disposal. The placement is deeply symbolic. The mirror, with its reflective surface, was likely seen as a portal or a guide for the soul in its journey to the afterlife. By burying it with the deceased directly under the family's sleeping area, the living were creating a permanent, physical link between the worlds of the living and the dead. The knowledge encoded here is about their beliefs concerning ancestry, the soul, and the continuity of the family unit within the very architecture of their homes. The obsidian mirror's meaning is unlocked not by its polish but by its profound context. This practice of meaningful placement is echoed across the globe in the Maya world. Deep within the dark, sacred heart of major temples like Tikal or Kapan, archaeologists have uncovered ritual caches, carefully sealed deposits of objects meant for the gods. Among the most common finds are clusters of obsidian blades, but they are rarely just tossed in a pile. They are frequently arranged in specific, intentional patterns. One famous cache revealed blades fanned out in a circular pattern, perhaps representing the sun or a cosmic portal. Another was found with blades pointing toward the four cardinal directions, a powerful symbol of the Maya universe's structure. These arrangements are far more than storage. They are frozen rituals, a snapshot of a ceremony designed to communicate with the divine. The spatial pattern of the blades encodes a cosmological map, a belief about the order of the heavens and the earth, using the volcanic glass as a potent, sacred marker to delineate that order. The true decoding of this spatial language requires looking at the entire assemblage. An obsidian knife found alone in a kitchen tells one story, a story of domestic work. But that same knife, discovered in a tomb nestled between a jade necklace and a painted ceramic bowl, tells a completely different story. Now it speaks of status, of wealth, and of a belief that this sharp, efficient tool was necessary for the deceased in whatever came next. Perhaps it was a status symbol for a master craftsman, or maybe it was intended for a spiritual purpose in the afterlife. The object itself hasn't changed, but its meaning is entirely defined by its context, by the other objects it was buried with. This associative encoding forces archaeologists to be detectives of place, understanding that the story isn't just in the shard of glass, but in the soil that surrounds it, the orientation it was laid in, and the treasures it was buried alongside. It teaches us that for ancient cultures, knowledge was often situational, and that the most important messages were written in the invisible connections between things. While we've explored how ancient hands shaped obsidian into tools and symbols, some of the most enduring knowledge was woven not into the stone itself, but into the very fabric of storytelling. Across countless cultures, obsidian became a central character in the grand myths and oral traditions that defined a people's understanding of the world, encoding a rich blend of practical guidance, spiritual belief, and historical memory into narratives told and retold for generations. This wasn't mere fantasy, it was a sophisticated survival strategy for information, ensuring that the most critical knowledge was memorized, performed, and passed down long before the written word could preserve it. Take the powerful Aztec creation myth surrounding the goddess Coyolxauhqui. The story recounts a divine struggle atop Serpent Mountain, where the war god Huitzilopochtli defends his mother by defeating his sister Coyolxauhqui, dismembering her body and casting it down the mountainside. Her head, according to the legend, was flung into the sky to become the moon, but the myth doesn't end there. It specifically states that from her scattered limbs, the first obsidian was born, sprouting from the earth where her pieces fell. On the surface, this is a dramatic tale of cosmic violence, but for the Aztec people, it was also a vital, encoded guide. The story inextricably links obsidian to the moon, to sacrifice, and to the cycle of death and rebirth, themes central to their worldview. More practically, it also provided a mythological map by suggesting obsidian originated from a specific, sacred location. The story preserved generational knowledge about where to find this precious resource, embedding geological fact within a compelling spiritual narrative that everyone would remember. This interplay between myth and material culture is where archaeology truly comes alive. Researchers can cross-reference these oral traditions with physical evidence, creating a powerful feedback loop of understanding. For instance, the myth of Coilxauhqui was given breathtaking tangible form when a massive, monolithic carving of her dismembered body was discovered at the base of the Templo Maya in Tenochtitlan. Significantly, the sculpture's eyes and ornaments were deeply carved, and analysis suggests these recesses were once inlaid with pieces of polished obsidian. The artifact literally mirrors the myth, using the very material born from the goddess to represent her. This isn't a coincidence, it's a deliberate encoding. The object serves as a physical anchor for the story, a focal point that a storyteller could gesture toward, making the abstract tale concrete and unforgettable for the listeners. The obsidian inlays weren't just decoration, they were the key that unlocked the myth's deeper meaning, connecting the audience to the divine origin of the stone they held in their hands every day. The true genius of this method lies in its resilience. Written records can burn or decay, but a story well told is incredibly durable. Through rhythmic language, song, and ritual reenactment, these oral traditions became living libraries. The knowledge wasn't stored on a shelf, it was carried in the minds and voices of the people. A myth about a culture hero who received the secret of napping obsidian from a volcano spirit would encode the entire chain of custody for that technology, who was allowed to learn it, the reverence required in its practice, and the proper techniques to avoid shattering the valuable glass. The repetitive nature of ritual storytelling ensured that this information was reinforced year after year, generation after generation, making the survival of the knowledge synonymous with the survival of the culture itself. By studying how obsidian is represented in these enduring narratives, we come to understand that for ancient civilizations, there was no firm line between the practical and the sacred. A single story could teach you how to find the best stone for a knife, why that knife was the proper tool for a heart sacrifice, and what would happen to the soul after the ritual was complete, all wrapped in one unforgettable epic. Now we move from the grand scale of myth to the microscopic realm of chemistry, where the secrets locked within obsidian aren't carved by human hands but forged by the earth itself. Every single flake of volcanic glass carries a hidden passport, a unique geochemical signature imprinted by the specific volcano that gave it birth. This isn't a metaphor, it's a scientific reality. The precise blend of trace elements like zirconium, strontium, and iron varies minutely from one volcanic flow to another, even if they are just a few miles apart. To the naked eye, two obsidian nodules from different continents might look identical, both jet black, both gleaming, but to a modern mass spectrometer, they tell completely different stories of origin. This innate, unchangeable chemical code has become one of the most powerful tools for archaeologists, allowing them to trace an artifact back to its exact source volcano with astonishing accuracy, effectively reading the hidden travel log encoded within the stone's very essence. This process, known as obsidian sourcing or characterization, has utterly revolutionized our understanding of ancient mobility and economics. Before this technology, finding an Aztec ritual knife in a Mayan tomb might have been written off as a curious anomaly. Now, by vaporizing a tiny, nearly invisible speck of that artifact and analyzing its elemental fingerprint, researchers can confidently state that it came from the Pachuca mines in central Mexico, over 600 miles away. This single piece of data transforms a solitary object into a dynamic data point on a map of ancient human interaction. It tells us that long before highways and global shipping, there existed vast, sophisticated trade networks crisscrossing continents. A piece of obsidian found in a 5,000-year-old village in Mesopotamia might be traced all the way back to a specific outcrop in central Anatolia, in modern-day Turkey. This isn't just evidence of trade, it's evidence of organized, long-distance exchange, likely managed by specialized merchants who knew the routes and the languages needed to move this precious commodity across countless cultural boundaries. The knowledge encoded in this chemical signature is multi-layered. On one level, it's a straightforward economic record, proof of supply and demand, but dig deeper and it reveals so much more. The consistent presence of high-quality Anatolian obsidian in elite Mesopotamian contexts suggests it was a prestige good, its value heightened by its exotic origin. This implies not just trade, but diplomacy, gifts between rulers to cement alliances, or items acquired by emerging elites to display their access to far-flung networks and enhance their social status. Furthermore, the movement of the material itself often meant the movement of ideas. A skilled napper traveling with the obsidian trade would have carried not only the raw glass but also the latest techniques in toolmaking, which could then spread and evolve in new regions. The obsidian, therefore, was a medium for technological transfer, its chemical signature silently witnessing the flow of innovation alongside commerce. This method powerfully demonstrates that encoding knowledge isn't always an act of deliberate human intention. Sometimes, the most profound information is encoded passively by the natural world itself. The ancient trader who carried that nugget of obsidian across hundreds of miles may have had no concept of zirconium ratios. His goal was likely practical and economic. Yet, by simply moving that material from its source to its destination, he was unknowingly creating a permanent chemical record of his journey, a record that we can now read thousands of years later. This transforms every obsidian artifact from a silent, static object into a vibrant witness to the past. It speaks of connections between distant peoples, of ambitious journeys undertaken, and of a deep, ancient human drive to acquire, to exchange, and to connect, with the unassuming volcanic glass serving as both the motivation and the perfect, durable ledger for it all. The deep, mirror-like surface of a polished obsidian disk offered ancient astronomers a brilliant solution to one of their most dangerous challenges: how to observe the heavens without blinding themselves. Staring directly at the sun to track its path or study an eclipse was a risky endeavor, but cultures like the Maya discovered that they could use obsidian's natural reflectivity to project a perfect, safe image of the celestial body onto a flat surface. Imagine a priest in a dim chamber within a pyramid, holding a disk of this volcanic glass. By carefully angling it to catch a beam of sunlight entering through a narrow shaft, he could cast a bright, defined circle of light onto a wall or a specially prepared stone slab. On the day of an eclipse, that circle would gradually darken as the moon passed in front of the sun, allowing for detailed observation and recording of the event's progression without ever looking skyward. This was more than just a clever trick. It was a sophisticated application of optical physics that turned a simple object into a powerful scientific instrument. This reflective technique was likely used to track more than just the sun. On a clear night, that same mirror could be used to capture the light of particularly bright stars or planets, like Venus, which held immense importance in Mesoamerican cosmology. The reflected point of light could be traced onto a surface over the course of nights and weeks, mapping its retrograde motion and changing brightness against the backdrop of other fixed stars. These observations were the foundation of their incredibly accurate calendars. By marking the extreme points where Venus appeared in the dawn sky, for instance, they could calculate its 584-day cycle with remarkable precision. The obsidian mirror became a kind of analog planetarium, a portable observatory that encoded complex, long-term astronomical data into tangible records, lines scratched on plaster, dots painted on codex pages, or alignments memorized through ritual repetition. Some artifacts provide even more tantalizing clues about this practice. Researchers have examined highly polished obsidian discs discovered in archaeological contexts and found not random scratches, but very fine, deliberate grooves etched along their edges. These grooves are often spaced at specific, regular intervals. One compelling theory suggests these were not decorations, but primitive computational aids. A priest could rotate the mirror, lining up one of these notches with a horizon marker or a specific temple doorway. The next notch would then indicate the point on the horizon where the sun would rise or set on the following day of a solstice or equinox. In this way, the mirror transformed from a simple reflective tool into a functioning analog computer, its etched markings serving as a permanent, durable record of celestial mechanics that could be used to predict future events and plan the intricate ritual calendar that governed every aspect of society. The true elegance of this method lies in its beautiful fusion of science and spirituality. The knowledge gained from these reflective observations wasn't just cold, hard data. It was woven directly into the culture's mythological narratives. The movement of the sun was the journey of a god through the underworld at night. An eclipse was a celestial battle, a moment of cosmic danger that required the correct rituals to ensure the sun's rebirth. The obsidian mirror, with its volcanic origins deep within the earth, was the perfect medium for this. It was a substance of the underworld used to understand the heavens, a black portal that bridged the two realms. By using it to encode astronomical knowledge, the Maya and other cultures were not merely recording dates. They were documenting the rhythms of the gods themselves, turning the cold, predictable clockwork of the cosmos into a living, breathing story of creation, struggle, and renewal that was reflected, quite literally, in a piece of polished volcanic glass. The sharp, clean edge of an obsidian blade was more than just a tool for ancient surgeons. It was an instrument of profound spiritual significance, weaving together the physical and metaphysical realms of healing. Among the Aztecs, who practiced some of the most advanced medicine in the ancient Americas, the choice of a surgical blade was a decision laden with meaning. They understood empirically that obsidian could be knapped to a monomolecular edge, far sharper than any metal scalpel, allowing for incredibly precise incisions that minimized tissue damage and reduced the risk of infection. But this technical knowledge was inseparable from a deeper, symbolic understanding. A blade used for a delicate eye surgery, for instance, might be crafted from a specific, translucent variety of obsidian, chosen not only for its fineness but for its perceived purity and connection to a deity like Tezcatlipoca, who could see all. The surgeon wasn't just performing a procedure, he was conducting a ritual, and the blade was his sacred instrument. This fusion of science and spirit is vividly illustrated by the artifacts themselves. Many surviving obsidian medical implements feature more than just a functional edge. Along the non-cutting spine or the hafting area, archaeologists have found meticulously etched symbols, a coiled serpent representing renewal, a series of dots for the 13 levels of heaven, or the stylized face of a healing god. These weren't mere decorations, they were a form of active encryption, turning the tool into a protective amulet. As the surgeon made his incision, he wasn't just cutting flesh. He was invoking divine power to guide his hand, ward off evil spirits that were thought to cause illness, and safeguard the patient's soul, which was believed to be vulnerable during such a traumatic physical event. The knowledge encoded here is a complete medical philosophy. That healing required addressing both the visible wound and the invisible spiritual imbalance that might have caused it. Ethnographic work with modern descendant communities helps us understand the broader context of these beliefs. In some Mesoamerican traditions, illness is still viewed not as a random biological event, but as a manifestation of spiritual disharmony or a loss of vital energy. The act of cutting, therefore, wasn't just about removing a tumor or letting blood. It was an act of purification, of releasing a corrupted spiritual substance from the body. The obsidian blade, born from the volcanic fires of the underworld, was uniquely suited for this task. Its cool, glassy surface was believed to have the power to absorb negative energy, while its extreme sharpness ensured the process was as swift and merciful as possible, reducing the patient's pain and spiritual distress. This holistic view encoded a sophisticated understanding of the mind-body connection that modern medicine is only recently beginning to fully appreciate, recognizing that a patient's belief and mental state are critical components of the healing process. The legacy of this encoded knowledge extends far beyond history books. Today, the incredible sharpness of obsidian is not just a curiosity, it has found a place in modern operating rooms. Some specialized surgeons, particularly in plastic and ocular surgery, now use obsidian scalpels for their superior edge, which can make cleaner cuts than even the finest steel and promote faster healing with less scar tissue. In a powerful echo of the past, the ancient material is again being used for its unparalleled practical properties. Yet, the symbolic weight of obsidian also endures within contemporary holistic and spiritual practices, where it is valued as a stone of protection and grounding. This enduring dual significance, the razor-sharp tool and the potent spiritual symbol, shows us that the ancient encoding was not superstition, but a profound and enduring insight. They understood that true healing is an art that requires the best of technology wielded with intention and respect, a lesson etched into every fragment of volcanic glass that ever served as a blade. While we have countless physical artifacts to study, some of the most vivid insights into obsidian's role in ancient life come not from the volcanic glass itself, but from how it was portrayed in the wider world of art. Ancient artists working in clay, paint, and bark paper consistently chose to include obsidian in their depictions of the most powerful and sacred moments, effectively using one medium to encode the significance of another. This creates a fascinating feedback loop for modern researchers, where a painted scene on a Maya vase can bring an excavated obsidian mirror to life, revealing its true purpose and power in a way the object alone never could. Take the beautiful polychrome vases created by Maya artists, which often illustrate courtly life and elaborate rituals. In these detailed scenes, we frequently see rulers and high priests depicted holding perfectly circular, jet-black discs. The artists took great care to render these objects with a deep, glossy sheen, often highlighting them with a reflective gleam, making it clear they are showing polished obsidian mirrors. These aren't just accessories, their placement in the scene is always significant. The ruler might be holding one while receiving a tribute, or a priest might be gazing into its surface during a ceremony. This artistic choice encodes a critical piece of social knowledge. The possession and use of these mirrors was a direct symbol of divinatory authority and political power. You didn't just own an obsidian mirror, You held a license to communicate with the gods and, by extension, the right to rule. The art tells us that everyone in that society would have instantly recognized this symbolism, understanding that the man with the mirror was a man to be respected and feared. This visual language is even more stark and dramatic in the Aztec codices, the painted books that survived the Spanish conquest. In pages detailing religious ceremonies, the artist almost always depicts the ritual knives used for heart sacrifice not as plain weapons, but with a distinctive black, glassy texture and a characteristic curved edge that immediately identifies them as obsidian. The codex might show a line of priests, each holding one of these Tecpatl knives, their black blades contrasting sharply with the bright red blood depicted in the scene. This isn't a simple illustration of a tool, it's a powerful encoding of a spiritual concept. The artists are telling us that the act of sacrifice required a specific, sacred material. An ordinary blade would not suffice. It had to be obsidian, born from the volcano and connected to the gods of the underworld to properly complete the ritual and nourish the sun. The art reinforces the idea that the material itself was holy, and its use was non-negotiable in the most important acts of state religion. The true power of studying these artistic representations lies in cross-referencing them with the physical evidence. Archaeologists might unearth an obsidian blade in a tomb. On its own, it's a sharp piece of volcanic glass, but when they compare it to a codex painting showing an identical blade being used in a specific funerary ritual, the object's story suddenly unfolds. That simple tool transforms into a key component of a soul's journey to the afterlife. Similarly, finding a real obsidian mirror in a royal tomb carries one meaning. Seeing that same type of mirror held by a god in a mural painting adds another layer, suggesting the ruler was claiming a divine likeness or authority. This multimedia approach to encoding knowledge was incredibly effective. A citizen might never hold an obsidian mirror or see a human sacrifice, but they would see these objects depicted on pottery in the market or in murals on public buildings. This constant visual reinforcement ensured that everyone understood the cultural script who had power, what objects were sacred, and how those objects were meant to be used. The art served as a public education system, broadcasting the symbolic importance of obsidian far and wide, ensuring that its meaning was never lost on anyone, from the highest priest to the most common farmer. Beyond the physical artifact, the story of obsidian was also written directly into the very language of ancient Mesoamerica, encoded in the intricate glyphs that documented their history and beliefs. For cultures like the Maya, whose writing system was a complex blend of logograms representing whole words and syllabic signs representing sounds, the concept of obsidian was important enough to warrant its own dedicated symbol. The Maya glyph for obsidian, read as tun, is a beautifully stylized representation that often looks like a rounded, almost pebble-like shape with a distinctive internal crosshatching or a set of parallel lines. This wasn't just a random drawing. Those internal lines brilliantly evoke the conchoidal fracturing and the sharp, layered nature of the volcanic glass itself, a perfect visual pun that captured the material's essence in a single, elegant character. The true depth of this linguistic encoding is revealed in how the glyph was used and modified. You rarely find the basic tun glyph standing alone. It was constantly being adapted and combined with other signs to create specific, nuanced meanings. When a scribe wanted to write about a ritual bloodletting ceremony, he might combine the obsidian glyph with a glyph for blood or a hand, creating a compound word that instantly communicated the act of auto-sacrifice using an obsidian lancet. In a context describing warfare, the tun glyph could be attached to a glyph for a spear or an enemy, transforming it into a symbol meaning obsidian-tipped spear or even war. This ability to build complex ideas from simpler glyphic components shows a highly sophisticated understanding of language, where obsidian wasn't just a noun but a versatile conceptual building block. The material was so deeply embedded in their culture that it became a fundamental part of their vocabulary for describing conflict, spirituality, and power. Epigraphers, the scholars who dedicate their lives to deciphering these ancient scripts, use these glyphic associations as a powerful window into the Maya worldview. By tracking where and how often the obsidian glyph appears, they can map its cultural significance. It shows up in texts describing the accession of a new king, often listed among the precious gifts and materials presented to him, signaling its status as a royal commodity. It appears in mythological passages describing the actions of the gods in the primordial past, linking the material to creation itself. Each appearance is a data point, and together they paint a picture of a society that saw this volcanic glass as a cornerstone of their identity. The written word, therefore, didn't just describe obsidian. It actively participated in encoding its value, ensuring that every time a scribe recorded a history or a myth, the importance of ton was reinforced and preserved for future generations to read and understand. Sometimes the most powerful way to preserve a message is not to keep something whole, but to break it apart with purpose. Across the ancient world, from the ceremonial plazas of Mesoamerica to the sacred sites of the Mediterranean, we find evidence of a fascinating and counterintuitive practice, the intentional shattering of precious obsidian artifacts. This was not an act of carelessness or violence, but a highly ritualized form of encoding, where the very act of destruction was imbued with profound meaning. Imagine a beautifully polished obsidian mirror, a prized possession that took an artisan months to create. During a key ceremony, a priest would deliberately strike it, fragmenting it into several pieces. To a modern eye, this might seem like wanton destruction, but in that moment, the object's purpose was transformed. Its wholeness was sacrificed to create something new, a set of symbolic fragments, each one now carrying a piece of the original object's power and significance. This ritual breakage served as a powerful physical metaphor for concepts that were central to many ancient belief systems. In pre-Columbian cultures, breaking an obsidian blade could symbolize the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth. The idea that something must end for something new to begin, much like a seed must break open for a plant to grow. For the ancient Greeks, who believed certain types of volcanic glass had protective qualities, shattering an obsidian amulet might have been a way to disseminate its power, distributing its protective blessing among many people or across a wider area. The fragments themselves became the encoded message. A piece of a broken mirror given to each participant at a ceremony was more than a souvenir. It was a tangible piece of a shared spiritual experience, a physical reminder of a covenant or a blessing that connected the individual to the whole community. It taught that even in fragmentation there is connection, and that a whole can exist in a distributed, collective form. Archaeologists decipher this ritual language through meticulous detective work. When they uncover caches of obsidian fragments, they don't simply assume they found trash. They carefully collect every single piece, no matter how small, and embark on a process known as refitting. Like solving a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle, they attempt to physically reassemble the original object. This process is incredibly revealing. If the pieces fit back together perfectly, it indicates a single, deliberate impact, a ritual breakage. If the fragments show additional wear or polishing on the new edges, it suggests they were further worked after breaking, perhaps to be hafted into new objects or worn as personal talismans. These refitting experiments can sometimes trace fragments from a single original object across an entire site, or even to different villages, mapping the physical distribution of whatever message or power that initial act of breakage was meant to encode. This practice elevates the nature of the material itself to a teaching tool. Obsidian, with its incredible sharpness and its equally incredible brittleness, was the perfect medium for this lesson. Its glassy structure means it doesn't just crumble, it fractures with conchoidal breaks that are sharp and precise. This physical property made the act of breakage predictable and its results meaningful. The fragility of the glass encoded the fragility of life and the permanence of change, while its resilient, sharp fragments symbolized that even from destruction, something potent and useful can emerge. The act of ritual breakage, therefore, was a multi-sensory performance of a core philosophical truth. It used the visceral sound of shattering glass and the physical distribution of the pieces to encode a complex understanding of the universe, that wholeness and fragmentation are not opposites, but part of a continuous, sacred cycle. While we often picture ancient artisans shaping obsidian through physical force alone, some of their most sophisticated techniques involved not just striking the stone, but fundamentally transforming it with fire. This practice of thermal alteration represents a profound leap in technological thinking, a move from working with the material's natural state to actively engineering its very properties. The process itself was delicate and required immense, carefully guarded knowledge. Obsidian, being a volcanic glass, has a specific glass transition temperature. Heat it too little and nothing changes. Heat it too much or too quickly, and the internal stresses cause it to explode into worthless, popcorn-like fragments. But heat it just right in a controlled, gradual process, and a remarkable transformation occurs. The stone becomes less brittle, its internal structure relaxing slightly, which allows for a much greater degree of control during knapping. This wasn't just about making the job easier. It was about achieving a level of precision and producing tool forms that were simply impossible with raw, unheated material. The evidence for this ancient material science is written in the glass itself, but you need to know how to read it. Modern archaeologists use high-powered microscopes to examine the edges of ancient tools. On a piece of raw obsidian, the fracture lines are typically very smooth and clean. But on a tool that has been properly heat-treated, researchers find a distinctive microscopic signature, a subtle rippling or glossiness along the flake scars. This is the telltale mark of controlled heating and cooling, a permanent change in the material's fracture mechanics that the artisan intentionally created. In some cases, this treatment was applied selectively. An artisan might heat-treat only the core of a large nodule, leaving the outer rind untouched. This created a dual-quality material, a tougher, easier-to-work interior for crafting the main body of a tool, surrounded by a harder, sharper natural crust that could be used for the final, fine cutting edge. This level of control indicates a deep, experimental understanding of thermodynamics that we rarely attribute to ancient societies. The knowledge encoded in this process was likely among the most valuable secrets a master napper could possess. It wouldn't have been written down. It was encoded in a lived practice, passed down through generations as a series of sensory experiences, knowing how to build the right kind of insulating sand bath oven, recognizing the exact color change in the coals, understanding the sound the stone makes when it has reached the perfect temperature. The finished object, with its superior workability and distinctive glossy fractures, was its own certificate of authenticity. It was proof of the maker's elite status and their access to this advanced technical knowledge. In this way, a simple-looking obsidian blade could silently communicate a wealth of information about the skill hierarchy and technological sophistication of the culture that produced it. Its altered state a permanent record of a secret mastered through fire and patience. The movement of obsidian across vast distances did more than just transport a valuable commodity. It acted as a catalyst for a remarkable fusion of ideas, creating hybrid artifacts that tell a story of ancient globalization and intellectual cross-pollination. When a piece of obsidian traveled hundreds of miles from its volcanic source, it didn't arrive as a blank slate. It often carried with it the cultural fingerprints of its origin, a specific style of knapping, a particular way of notching a blade, or a symbolic engraving meaningful to the people who first worked it. As this object entered a new cultural sphere, it was frequently reworked, repurposed, or reinterpreted by local artisans who blended these foreign influences with their own deeply held traditions. The resulting object becomes a physical dialogue between cultures, a testament to the fact that ancient knowledge systems were not rigid and isolated, but dynamic, adaptable, and constantly enriched through contact and exchange. A stunning example of this cultural alchemy comes from the American Southwest, where archaeologists have uncovered obsidian artifacts sourced from central Mexican volcanoes like Pachuca, famous for its distinctive green-gold sheen. But these aren't typical Mesoamerican objects. Instead, they appear as fascinating hybrids. Imagine a ceremonial knife point. Its form might be classic Hohokam or ancestral Puebloan, a shape perfectly suited to local rituals. Yet, upon closer inspection, the base of the point features a series of precise, tiny notches, a technical signature commonly associated with master knappers from the great city of Teotihuacan far to the south. Even more telling, the surface might be engraved with a symbol that is itself a fusion. Perhaps a feathered serpent, a potent Mesoamerican deity, is depicted coiling around a Puebloan rain cloud symbol. This isn't just a random mix of patterns. It's a deliberate, encoded synthesis of two different worldviews into a new, cohesive spiritual statement. Decoding these hybrid objects allows archaeologists to trace far more than just trade routes for raw materials. They can map the exchange of entire concepts. The presence of a fused symbol on an obsidian blade suggests that the trade networks moving this glass were also conduits for stories, religious ideas, and technological know-how. A trader from the south wouldn't just hand over a chunk of raw obsidian. He might demonstrate a new, more efficient way to fracture it, or share a tale about the god associated with the volcano that produced it. The local artisan, in turn, would adapt that technique or that symbol, filtering it through their own cultural lens and available resources. The resulting artifact encodes this entire process of adoption, adaptation, and innovation. It shows us that these interactions were likely peaceful and based on mutual curiosity and respect, a far cry from the old-fashioned view of ancient societies as perpetually isolated and warlike. This process of hybridization reveals the incredible intellectual flexibility of ancient peoples. They were not passive recipients of foreign goods. They were active participants in a network of knowledge, selectively incorporating new ideas and blending them with established practices to create something uniquely their own. An obsidian core might be reduced using a hybrid technique that maximized yield, a practical innovation born from combining different schools of thought. A mirror might be framed in a local style but polished to a Mesoamerican standard of perfection. Each choice, each blend, encodes a decision made centuries ago, a decision to learn, to adapt, and to see value in the ways of others. These artifacts stand as powerful reminders that cultural identity has always been fluid, and that some of humanity's greatest innovations have emerged not from isolation, but from the beautiful, complex, and endlessly creative space where different worlds meet and merge. Beyond its practical and scientific uses, obsidian's most enduring power may lie in its profound symbolic weight, a natural metaphor made solid. That deep, impenetrable blackness which seems to swallow light whole instinctively evokes the mysteries that have always haunted the human imagination: the void before creation, the terrifying journey of the afterlife, the hidden depths of our own subconscious minds. Yet when polished to a mirror finish, that same void becomes reflective, creating a surface that gives back a distorted, shadowy version of the viewer's own face. This dual nature, a darkness that both obscures and reveals, made obsidian the perfect material for grappling with the biggest questions of existence, transforming it into a philosophical tool that encoded some of humanity's earliest insights into the nature of reality and the self. This symbolism was actively harnessed in the practice of scrying, a form of divination that reached across cultures from the Aztec priests of Mesoamerica to the mystics of ancient China. The ritual was deeply intentional. A seer would often fast or meditate to enter a trance-like state, then gaze into the depths of a polished obsidian mirror, not to see their own reflection, but to see past it. They believed the dark, reflective surface acts as a threshold, a liminal space where the veil between the physical world and the spiritual realm grew thin. The goal wasn't to see clear images like a television screen, but to interpret the shimmering movements, the subtle shifts in light and shadow, and the shapes that seemed to form in the glassy depths. These visual phenomena, likely amplified by eye fatigue and an altered state of consciousness, were interpreted as messages from ancestors, visions of future events, or diagnoses of spiritual ailments. The knowledge encoded here is a sophisticated understanding of psychology. These rituals were an early form of guided introspection, using the obsidian mirror as a focal point to quiet the conscious mind and access intuitive, subconscious knowledge. The metaphorical power of this practice extends into how we still talk about self-discovery today. We speak of soul-searching or looking inward, and the obsidian mirror is perhaps the ultimate ancient symbol for that very concept. Its surface reflects the viewer but darkly, suggesting that true self-knowledge requires looking beyond the superficial ego and into the darker, more complex shadows of the psyche. This makes the object a tangible representation of the journey toward wisdom, a journey that requires confronting what is unknown, uncomfortable, and hidden within ourselves. An Aztec priest using a Tezcatlipoca mirror for divination wasn't just trying to predict the future. He was engaging in a ritual that encoded a fundamental philosophical truth, that the answers we seek externally often lie within, and that understanding the self is the first step toward understanding the universe. This rich symbolism ensured that obsidian's meaning was captured in other art forms, reinforcing its cultural importance. In Maya painted ceramics, rulers are frequently depicted holding obsidian mirrors as scepters of office, their reflective surfaces often shown capturing the gaze of a deity or a celestial body. This wasn't just a sign of wealth, it was a visual claim that the ruler possessed the inner sight and wisdom to lead, that he could perceive hidden truths and divine will. In literature, from ancient myths to modern fantasy, black mirrors and pools of dark water continue to serve as portals to other worlds or tools for uncovering painful truths, a direct descendant of this ancient symbolic tradition. By tracing this symbolic thread, we see that obsidian was more than a rock. It was a conceptual anchor, a physical object that gave form to humanity's most abstract and enduring questions about life, death, and the nature of consciousness itself. While obsidian could be fashioned into the sharpest of blades in the hands of the elite, it was often shaped into something far more subtle, a symbol of power. Beyond its use in rituals and tools, this volcanic glass became a powerful currency in the ancient economy of prestige, a material that silently but unmistakably encoded an individual's wealth, status, and political reach. In the great city-states of ancient Mesopotamia, for instance, finding a chunk of raw obsidian was one thing, but possessing an exquisitely carved obsidian vessel or an intricate inlay set into a piece of furniture was something else entirely. These were not practical items, they were luxury goods, statements of exquisite taste and immense privilege. The very existence of such an object was a clear declaration. It said its owner had the means to commission a master artisan for a painstaking, months-long project using a material that had itself traveled hundreds of miles over dangerous trade routes. This wasn't just about having a nice bowl. It was about displaying your access to a vast, interconnected network of commerce and craftsmanship that was far beyond the reach of the common person. The specific qualities of the obsidian itself were part of this encoded message. Not all volcanic glass was considered equal. A ruler or high priest wouldn't be caught dead with just any common black variety. They sought out the rare and the exotic. The most prized obsidian often came from specific, distant sources known for their unique visual properties, like the stunning green-gold sheen of the Pachuca mines in Mexico or the mesmerizing rainbow obsidian found in certain American flows. The size of the artifact also spoke volumes. A large, flawless obsidian mirror required finding a massive, unblemished nugget to begin with, a rarity in itself, and then the skill to polish it without a single crack or cloudiness. The larger and more perfect the mirror, the greater the status it conferred upon its owner. The decoration, too, was critical. An undecorated lump of obsidian was a raw material. That same piece, carved with the likeness of a city's patron deity or inlaid with gold and lapis lazuli, became a masterpiece, its added ornamentation encoding a further layer of value and divine association. Archaeologists decode this ancient language of status by meticulously mapping where these luxury items are found. A simple obsidian blade fragment discovered in a common household's trash pit tells a story of everyday cutting tasks. But an entire, unused ceremonial obsidian knife, found carefully placed in a royal tomb alongside other treasures like gold jewelry and imported pottery, tells a completely different story. Its context transforms it from a tool into a token of elite identity, a funerary good meant to proclaim the deceased's high station in the afterlife just as it had in life. By studying these distribution patterns, researchers can trace how obsidian moved from being a utilitarian commodity in its source region to becoming an elite prestige good in faraway lands. Its value was not inherent, it was culturally assigned, growing with every mile it traveled from its origin, a process known as distance value enhancement. This economic encoding reveals a sophisticated understanding of soft power long before the term was ever coined. A Mesopotamian king might gift an ornate obsidian vessel to a visiting diplomat from a neighboring state. This was far more than a friendly gesture. It was a calculated political move. The gift encoded a multi-layered message. It demonstrated the king's immense wealth and his access to long-distance trade networks that his neighbor might lack. It showcased the superior skill of his kingdom's artisans, and it implicitly positioned him as a patron whose favor was worth cultivating. In this way, obsidian became a medium for negotiating alliances, displaying dominance and reinforcing social hierarchies. The knowledge embedded in these exchanges wasn't about astronomy or ritual. It was a complex social code, an understanding that controlling rare materials and their symbolism was just as important as controlling armies or farmland in maintaining power and structuring ancient society. Imagine an ancient master craftsman carefully handing a perfectly scaled obsidian model of a jaguar to a young apprentice. The figure isn't just a beautiful sculpture, it's a lesson made solid, a three-dimensional textbook designed to teach anatomy, spiritual significance, and the very principles of working this demanding volcanic glass. This practice of using obsidian artifacts as pedagogical tools represents one of the most intimate and forward-thinking methods of knowledge encoding, moving beyond simple preservation to focus on active, effective transmission to the next generation. While we often picture ancient education as a sage lecturing students, evidence suggests a far more interactive and hands-on approach, with obsidian serving as the perfect medium for these tangible lessons. Its durability meant a well-crafted teaching aid could survive decades of use, being passed from one generation of learners to the next, while its inherent value and difficulty to work with demanded respect and focused attention from the student. The potential forms these educational objects took were likely as varied as the subjects they taught. For a lesson in zoology and clan symbolism, a set of obsidian figurines could depict the local fauna with astonishing accuracy. The powerful curl of a serpent, the distinctive spots of a jaguar, the poised alertness of a deer. A teacher could use these models to point out specific physical features, discuss the animal's habitat and behavior, and explain its role in mythology as a spiritual guide or ancestor. In astronomy, a polished obsidian orb could represent the moon, while smaller, precisely shaped crescents and disks could be arranged by students on a dark cloth to replicate the phases of the lunar cycle or a predicted eclipse, turning abstract celestial mechanics into a tactile, memorable experience. For teaching intricate mythology, a skilled artisan might create a series of engraved obsidian plaques, each depicting a key scene from an epic creation story. Arranged in order, they would form a visual narrative, a storyboard that helped both the storyteller remember the sequence of events and the audience visualize the epic tale. The creation of these objects was itself a masterclass, encoding a secondary layer of technical knowledge. The process of napping a complex shape like a flower or a star from obsidian without it shattering requires an intuitive understanding of the material's fracture mechanics, a knowledge of how to apply pressure at precisely the right angle with exactly the right force. A master wouldn't just give an apprentice a verbal explanation. He would demonstrate, then hand the young learner a pre-formed core and guide their hands through the process. The failed attempts, the shattered models, were just as much a part of the lesson as the successful one, teaching respect for the material and the consequences of impatience or imprecise technique. In this way, the very act of creating a teaching tool was a taught lesson, embedding the master's skill into the apprentice's muscle memory through direct, hands-on engagement. This interpretation is powerfully supported by ethnographic studies with contemporary indigenous cultures who maintain traditional craft skills. In some Native American communities, the art of flint knapping is still taught not through diagrams or lectures, but by sitting together, with the master creating a series of progressively more complex preforms for the student to practice on. Each preform is a lesson plan designed to teach a specific skill: how to remove a long, thinning flake, how to shape a notched base, how to pressure flake a razor-sharp edge. The student learns by doing, by feeling the vibration of a successful fracture versus the dull crunch of a mistake. The obsidian itself, in its raw and worked states, is the primary textbook. This method of knowledge transfer is incredibly effective because it engages multiple senses simultaneously: sight, sound, and touch, creating a deeper, more resilient memory. Viewing certain enigmatic obsidian artifacts through this pedagogical lens allows archaeologists to reinterpret their purpose. A cache of small, beautifully made but non-utilitarian obsidian points found in a context not associated with warfare or hunting might not be ritual offerings, but rather a set of teaching samples, each demonstrating a different napping technique or a different stage in the reduction process for a student to study and emulate. An exquisitely detailed but fragile obsidian flower was likely never meant to be worn or used. Its purpose was to showcase the absolute pinnacle of what was possible, a masterpiece for apprentices to aspire to, encoding the highest level of artistic and technical achievement. This perspective reveals that ancient societies invested tremendous effort into education, understanding that their knowledge and skills were their most valuable inheritance. They used the permanence and the physicality of volcanic glass to build a bridge across generations, ensuring that their wisdom wasn't just stored away but actively touched, held, and understood by the hands of the future. The journey of an obsidian tool began long before it ever reached an artisan's hands, rooted in a deep and intimate understanding of the land itself. Ancient peoples were not just passive collectors of this volcanic glass. They were the original geologists and ecologists, possessing a sophisticated knowledge of the environment that was meticulously encoded into their entire relationship with the material. This wisdom wasn't stored in books or maps as we know them, but in a living library of oral tradition, practical experience, and spiritual belief, all woven together to form a sustainable system of resource management that lasted for thousands of years. In the vast landscapes of the American West, for instance, indigenous communities like the Paiute and Shoshone carried incredibly detailed mental maps of the region's obsidian sources. The location of each flow was more than just a dot on a landscape. It was a place with a name, a story, and a set of rules. These stories often explain the volcanic origins of the glass through powerful mythological events, perhaps telling of a great badger digging deep into the earth or a sky god hurling down a lightning bolt that fused the sand into glass. These narratives were far more than just folklore. They were mnemonic devices that preserved critical practical information. A story about a specific spirit guarding a particular cliff face might encode the very real dangers of accessing that deposit, while a tale about a gift from the underworld at a certain location would mark it as a particularly rich and sacred source. This fusion of the practical and the spiritual ensured that the knowledge of where to find the best material was remembered and treated with the respect it deserved, passed down through generations not as a dry list of coordinates, but as a vital part of the culture's sacred history. This profound connection to place dictated every aspect of the obsidian's use, from its extraction to its final form. The act of quarrying was often a ritualized process, governed by strict protocols that encoded a principle of sustainability long before the term was ever coined. At the massive obsidian quarries of Casa Diablo in California or Bear Gulch in Idaho, archaeological evidence shows that ancient miners didn't simply strip mine the landscape. They worked specific, targeted seams, often leaving ceremonial offerings like finely crafted arrowheads or shell beads in the excavation pits as payments to the earth for the material taken. This practice wasn't superstition. It was a tangible expression of a worldview that saw humans not as separate from nature, but as participants in a reciprocal relationship with it. Taking a resource required giving something back, ensuring the balance was maintained and the source would continue to provide for future generations. The knowledge of how to properly extract the stone without damaging the core of the deposit or depleting it entirely was embedded in these ritual practices, making sustainability a religious imperative as much as an economic one. The distribution of this material further encoded a complex understanding of ecology and social geography. The specific type of obsidian found in a tool discovered hundreds of miles from its source tells a story not just of trade but of adapted travel. The routes taken by traders and the seasonal rounds of hunter-gatherers were intricately tied to the availability of resources like water, game, and edible plants. Obsidian, as a high-value, lightweight commodity, moved along these same pathways, its journey mapping a people's deep familiarity with their environment. A tool made from obsidian only found in the high deserts of eastern Oregon, but discovered in a coastal settlement, tells us that someone knew how to traverse those mountain passes at the right time of year, where to find water along the way, and which groups to interact with at different points on the route. The material itself becomes a proxy for understanding ancient migration patterns, social networks, and ecological adaptation. Its chemical signature a durable record of human movement through a perfectly understood landscape. By combining the hard data of archaeometry, which can pinpoint a tool's origin to a specific volcano, with the rich details of ethnographic studies from modern indigenous groups, researchers can now reconstruct this ancient ecological wisdom. They can see how a culture's entire seasonal cycle might have been arranged in part to facilitate access to a critical obsidian source, timing their arrival for when the weather made travel feasible and when other resources in the area were also abundant. This reveals a holistic system where the procurement of a single material was seamlessly integrated into a broader strategy of survival and flourishing. The knowledge was encoded in the very pattern of their lives, in the routes they walked, the stories they told at campfires along the way, and the respect they showed the sources themselves. It shows us that for ancient peoples, obsidian was never just a rock. It was a point of connection, a thread woven through their understanding of the world, binding together geology, ecology, spirituality, and community into a single, sustainable way of life. Now let's consider how entire stories could be preserved not on a single object, but across a carefully arranged collection of them, a kind of ancient graphic novel etched in volcanic glass. This method of narrative sequencing transforms a group of artifacts into a cohesive visual storyboard, where the true meaning only emerges when the pieces are viewed in their intended order. Imagine archaeologists carefully excavating a sealed chamber in an elite Maya tomb. Instead of finding a random assortment of grave goods, they uncover a set of 9 exquisitely crafted obsidian blades, each nearly identical in size and shape, but each one bearing a different, intricate engraving. Laid out in a precise semicircle around the head of the deceased, the arrangement itself is a clue. The first blade shows a young man emerging from the mouth of a cave, the second depicts him battling a grotesque monster, and the final one shows him transformed into a radiant god ascending to the heavens. Individually, each blade is a beautiful but enigmatic artifact. Together, they recount a complete hero's journey, a well-known mythological cycle that served as a roadmap for the soul's own voyage into the afterlife. This was more than mere decoration. It was a functional guide, a durable set of spiritual instructions meant to accompany and protect the deceased on their most important journey. The sophistication of this narrative technique speaks volumes about the importance of these stories to the culture's identity and beliefs. Creating such a sequence required incredible forethought and coordination. A master storyteller or priest would have first planned the entire narrative arc, breaking down the myth into its most essential, iconic scenes. This narrative blueprint was then passed to a master lapidary artisan, who faced the immense challenge of creating a series of visually consistent objects. Each blade had to be nearly perfect so that the viewer's attention would be drawn to the changing imagery, not to inconsistencies in the medium itself. The engraving process itself was a high-stakes act of preservation. One mistake, one slip of the hand that shattered a blade, could break the entire sequence and force the story to be reimagined or the scene lost forever. The successful completion of such a set represents a triumph of artistic collaboration and technical skill, all dedicated to ensuring that a core cultural narrative could survive literally for millennia, untouched by decay and safe from the misinterpretations that can creep into oral traditions over time. Decoding these ancient sequences is a painstaking puzzle for modern researchers. It requires a blend of forensic archaeology and deep cultural knowledge. The first step is often simply recognizing that a group of artifacts belongs together, a task made easier if they are discovered in a clear, undisturbed arrangement, like points on a compass or laid in a row. From there, experts act like literary critics analyzing a lost epic poem. They study the iconography on each piece, comparing the symbols to those found in known myths depicted on pottery, murals, or in the few surviving codices. The position of figures, the direction they are facing, and recurring motifs all provide clues to the narrative flow. For instance, if each successive blade shows a serpent with more feathers or a celestial body rising higher, it indicates a progression of time or a transformation. This process can completely change our understanding of a well-known myth, adding new episodes or revealing regional variations of the story that were previously unknown, all because a group of obsidian blades held their silence until we learned how to read their collective language. This practice reveals a fundamentally different, yet equally powerful, approach to storytelling than our modern reliance on written words. Without an alphabet, these sequences used a universal language of symbolism that could be understood by anyone within that culture, regardless of their literacy or dialect. A farmer and a king could both look at the sequence and understand the same fundamental story of creation, sacrifice, or renewal. The durability of obsidian meant the narrative was frozen in time, immune to the changes in language and the subtle shifts in meaning that can occur when stories are told and retold over centuries. It was a way to create a canonical, unchanging version of a myth, ensuring that the core values and beliefs it encoded about the nature of the gods, the rules of society, or the promise of an afterlife remained consistent and authoritative. In this way, a set of obsidian blades was far more than a burial good. It was a foundational text, a spiritual anchor, and a timeless testament to the human need to tell stories that define who we are and where we are going. But the power of obsidian to shape the mind went far deeper than just its reflective surface. It engaged the entire human sensory system in a carefully orchestrated psychological experience. That profound, almost infinite blackness of a polished mirror doesn't just reflect light, it seems to absorb it, creating a visual void that can be both disorienting and mesmerizing. When a person stares into such a depth, especially in the flickering, low light of a torch-lit ceremony, the eyes have nothing to focus on. This sensory deprivation is a well-known trigger for the brain to start generating its own imagery, a phenomenon that modern psychology recognizes as a gateway to trance states. For an ancient priest or shaman, this wasn't a random biological glitch. It was a deliberate tool. By guiding a participant to gaze into the obsidian, they were effectively initiating a controlled, visionary journey. The swirling patterns and shapes that emerged from the darkness were not seen as imaginings, but as divine messages, prophecies, or communications from ancestors, all drawn forth by the unique power of the volcanic glass. This practice encoded spiritual knowledge not through symbols etched on the surface, but through a direct, personal experience that felt utterly real and divine to the participant, making the lessons received in that state unforgettable. This psychological impact was powerfully amplified by the material's inherent sense of danger and its distinct tactile qualities. Holding a piece of obsidian is a uniquely cool and smooth experience. Its glassy surface feels almost unnaturally perfect against the skin. Yet that same object, with its edges sharper than any modern steel, carries an immediate and visceral threat. This combination, the soothing coolness and the perilous edge, creates a potent cognitive dissonance that heightens emotional arousal and sharpens focus. In a ritual context, this heightened state of awareness would have been invaluable. Imagine a young initiate undergoing a rite of passage, entrusted with a sacred obsidian blade for the first time. The weight of the object, its deadly potential, and the cool feel of it in their palm would focus their entire being on the moment. Every word spoken by an elder, every step of the ceremony, would be seared into their memory, tagged with this intense emotional and sensory experience. The knowledge being transmitted wasn't just heard, it was felt in the gut and remembered in the muscles, ensuring that the cultural and spiritual instructions became a core part of their identity, recalled with perfect clarity years later because of the powerful state in which they were learned. Cognitive archaeologists refer to this as embodied cognition, the idea that thought processes are deeply influenced by the body's interactions with the physical world. The ancient use of obsidian shows an intuitive, masterful understanding of this principle long before it had a name. They weren't just using a rock, they were leveraging its every property to manipulate cognitive and emotional states for a specific purpose. The coolness of the stone might have been used to calm and focus the mind before a divination, while its sharpness was a constant, physical reminder of the seriousness and potential consequences of the ritual. This multi-sensory engagement transformed learning from a passive activity into an active, whole-body immersion. A myth recounted while a listener held a sharp obsidian flake would be experienced differently than the same story told around a campfire. The object in their hand added a layer of tension, gravity, and tangible connection to the narrative, making the story's lessons about bravery, sacrifice, or respect for the gods feel immediate and real. This profound method of psychological encoding reveals a sophisticated ancient understanding of the human mind that rivals our modern insights. They recognized that for knowledge to truly endure, it couldn't just be memorized, it had to be lived and felt. By crafting rituals around the unique sensory properties of obsidian, they created powerful mnemonic devices that engaged emotion, touch, and sight simultaneously. This ensured that the most critical cultural knowledge, how to behave, what to believe, how to interact with the spirit world, wasn't just stored in the brain as facts, but was woven into the very fabric of a person's conscious and subconscious mind. The volcanic glass became a key that unlocked not just the secrets of the universe, but the hidden potentials of human perception and memory itself. The quest to unravel the messages left in volcanic glass has entered a breathtaking new era, propelled by technologies that would seem like pure magic to the ancient artisans themselves. Where researchers once relied on magnifying glasses and educated guesses, they now employ high-resolution 3D scanners that can create perfect digital replicas of an artifact, capturing every microscopic groove and surface undulation without ever touching the fragile original. These digital twins can then be rotated, lit from virtual angles impossible to achieve in a lab, and even algorithmically analyzed by artificial intelligence trained to recognize patterns too subtle or complex for the human eye to consistently detect. An AI might scrutinize 10,000 images of obsidian blades, learning to distinguish between random weathering and intentional, faint scoring that forms part of a long-forgotten notation system. This isn't just about seeing more, it's about seeing differently, allowing us to perceive the fingerprints of intention left behind centuries ago, revealing a level of planning and precision in these artifacts that we are only now beginning to fully appreciate. This technological revolution is deeply intertwined with a profound shift in philosophy, a move toward collaboration and respect that is reshaping the entire field. Modern archaeologists and anthropologists increasingly recognize that the most advanced scanner in the world is useless without the cultural context to understand what it's seeing. They are now partnering directly with descendant communities, the modern-day inheritors of these ancient traditions, creating a powerful dialogue between cutting-edge science and enduring oral knowledge. A scientist might use a portable X-ray fluorescence device to pinpoint the geological source of an obsidian blade in seconds, but it is often an indigenous elder who can explain why that particular source was considered sacred, or what the myth associated with that mountain reveals about the blade's intended ritual purpose. This collaborative model ensures that the secrets being decoded are not just extracted, but are understood within the living framework of the culture that created them, transforming artifacts from silent curiosities into vibrant chapters of an ongoing story. This beautiful synergy between the ultra-modern and the traditional is creating a legacy that stretches far beyond the walls of museums and universities. The ancient mastery of obsidian working, for instance, is directly inspiring contemporary materials science. Researchers studying the conchoidal fracture patterns of obsidian are gaining insights that could lead to the development of stronger, more shatter-resistant forms of glass and ceramics. The sophisticated ways ancient cultures combined materials, like setting obsidian in gold or jade to create composite artifacts with layered meanings, inform modern studies in material synergy and composite design. Even the field of cryptography looks to these ancient methods of steganography, where messages were hidden in plain sight through microscopic inscriptions or symbolic arrangements, for inspiration in developing new ways to secure digital information. The past is proving to be a surprisingly rich source of innovation for the future. Perhaps the most significant legacy of all is the way this ongoing exploration is inspiring a new generation to see the world with more curious and connected eyes. The story of obsidian encoding is a powerful antidote to the outdated notion that ancient history is a static record of primitive people. Instead, it reveals a dynamic tapestry of incredible ingenuity, where art, science, spirituality, and storytelling were woven together into a cohesive whole. This holistic approach resonates deeply today as we increasingly seek to break down the artificial barriers between disciplines. The humble shard of volcanic glass becomes a gateway to understanding that human creativity has always been our greatest resource, and that the drive to communicate, to create, and to make sense of our world is a timeless thread connecting us across the centuries. This ongoing dialogue, fueled by both silicon chips and ancestral wisdom, ensures that the knowledge etched in obsidian remains not a closed book, but an open invitation to keep exploring the endless depths of human ingenuity. This journey into the past, armed with our powerful modern tools, brings with it a profound responsibility, one that the scientific community is increasingly embracing with humility and care. For many indigenous peoples across the Americas, the obsidian artifacts we so eagerly study are not merely ancient curiosities. They are living ancestors, sacred objects that maintain a spiritual connection to their communities and hold knowledge that is not meant for unrestricted public consumption. A beautifully polished Aztec mirror used for scrying isn't just an archaeological specimen. For a descendant, it is a direct link to a priestly ancestor, a vessel of power that demands reverence and specific ceremonial handling. The very act of removing such an object from its context and placing it behind glass in a distant museum can be seen as a deep spiritual violation, a severing of a relationship that has lasted for centuries. This understanding forces a critical ethical shift, moving the question from "what can we learn from this?" to "how should we learn from this and who should guide the process?" This new ethical framework is transforming the very nature of research, moving away from a model of extraction and toward one of collaboration and reciprocity. Community-based participatory research is becoming the gold standard, where projects are co-designed with descendant communities from the very beginning. This means that before a single laser scanner is aimed at an artifact, researchers are sitting down with tribal historic preservation officers and cultural leaders. Together, they establish protocols which objects can be studied and which are too sacred to be disturbed, what imaging techniques are acceptable, how the data will be stored and who will have access to it, and perhaps most importantly, how the knowledge gained will be returned to and benefit the community. This might take the form of creating educational materials for tribal schools, training community members in archaeological techniques, or supporting language revitalization projects. The goal is to ensure that the community is not just a subject of study but an active partner and primary beneficiary, transforming a historically one-sided relationship into a mutually respectful exchange. This collaborative spirit is powerfully embodied in the growing movement toward repatriation, the return of culturally significant objects and human remains to their rightful communities. Legislation like the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act in the United States has provided a crucial legal pathway, but the true progress is happening through the building of relationships and a shared commitment to justice. Museums are increasingly proactively reaching out to tribes, inviting them to review collections and initiate the repatriation process for objects that were often acquired under colonial duress or through inequitable power dynamics. The return of an obsidian cache blade bundle to a Pueblo community, for instance, isn't seen as a loss to science, but as a restoration of cultural patrimony. That bundle can now be properly cared for according to traditional protocols, and its story can be told by the people for whom it holds the deepest meaning, ensuring its legacy continues within the living culture that created it. Ultimately, this ethical dimension adds the most crucial and modern layer to our story of obsidian. It reminds us that the drive to encode knowledge is not a relic of the past, it is a vibrant, ongoing human impulse. Today, the encoding continues, but now it is about embedding principles of respect, consent, and partnership into the very methodology of discovery. It challenges us to approach these ancient secrets not as puzzles to be solved for our own gratification, but as conversations to be entered into with grace. The most profound decoding we can achieve may not be of the glyphs on the artifact's surface, but of the responsibility we hold in our hands when we choose to pick it up, a responsibility to honor the past by faithfully serving its future. Even with all the incredible discoveries we've made, the surface has barely been scratched. The true expanse of what we don't know about ancient obsidian encoding is both humbling and exhilarating, a vast frontier of unanswered questions that beckons with the promise of rewriting history. One of the most tantalizing mysteries lies at the microscopic level. We've found faint grids and patterns, but what if these are merely the preamble? Could there be entire libraries of information inscribed on artifacts that we've simply lacked the resolution to see? Imagine an obsidian scepter, its surface appearing smooth and unadorned to every technology we've used so far. But what if, hidden in its depths, are nanoscale inscriptions, a complete linguistic script detailing a king's genealogy or a mathematical formula predicting planetary motion? The development of even more advanced imaging, perhaps using quantum sensing or atomic force microscopy, could one day reveal these whispers, allowing us to read a text finer than a human hair, a library on a pinhead. Another profound puzzle is the phenomenon of independent innovation. How did cultures separated by vast oceans and millennia, from the Maya in Mesoamerica to the Minoans on Crete, all arrive at the same profound conclusion that this volcanic glass was a conduit for the divine and a perfect medium for secret knowledge? Was it simply the material's unique properties that naturally suggested these uses to any intelligent society that encountered it? Or does it hint at a deeper, more interconnected ancient world than our current models allow, where ideas and technologies diffused along lost trade routes we have yet to map? Perhaps there is a shared element of human psychology, a universal recognition that something born of the Earth's fiery heart and cooled into a perfect black mirror must possess power beyond the ordinary. Unraveling this thread could tell us less about the stone itself and more about the fundamental, shared wiring of the human mind when confronted with the mysterious. The tools to solve these puzzles are emerging at a breathtaking pace, each new technology offering a fresh lens through which to view the past. Neutron activation analysis, for instance, goes beyond simple chemical sourcing. By bombarding a tiny sample with neutrons, scientists can detect an even wider array of trace elements, creating an impossibly detailed geochemical fingerprint. This could allow us to pinpoint an artifact not just to a specific volcano, but to a single flow or even a particular quarrying event within that flow, effectively tracing the precise journey of a single nodule from its source to its final resting place. Meanwhile, virtual and augmented reality are opening doors to experiential archaeology. Researchers could create a perfect digital twin of an entire ceremonial cache of obsidian blades, and then, in a virtual space, experiment with their arrangement, testing how sunlight at different times of the year would interact with them or how sound waves would bounce off their specific configurations. We could virtually nap a digital core 1,000 times to understand the precise skill required, or walk through a reconstructed temple holding a virtual obsidian mirror to experience the ritual exactly as an ancient priest would have. This relentless pursuit is about far more than satisfying academic curiosity. It encodes a powerful message for the present, a testament to human curiosity and perseverance. Each tiny obsidian shard that survives is a challenge thrown down across the centuries, a dare to become smarter, more creative, and more collaborative in our quest for understanding. It reminds us that history is not a closed book but a living, breathing field of study where a single new discovery can overturn decades of assumptions. The future of this research promises to continually blur the lines between the ancient and the modern, between spiritual intuition and scientific validation, inviting us all to look at a simple piece of black glass and see not just a tool, but a timeless key to the boundless ingenuity of the human spirit. From the intricate symbolic engravings that turned a simple blade into a sacred calendar to the profound psychological impacts of gazing into a mirror that bridged the conscious and subconscious mind, the ways lost civilizations encoded knowledge in obsidian reveal a sophistication that truly rivals our modern technologies. These volcanic glass artifacts are far more than silent relics gathering dust in museum cases. They are active, vibrant participants in the epic story of human innovation. They preserve and transmit insights into astronomy so precise they could predict celestial cycles, medical practices that blended impeccable skill with spiritual wisdom, trade networks that connected continents, and spiritual beliefs that sought to explain our very place in the universe. As we continue to decode these ancient secrets, using everything from electron microscopes to collaborative partnerships with descendant communities, we gain so much more than just a deeper appreciation for ancient ingenuity. We uncover invaluable lessons about sustainable resource management, about the power of multi-sensory communication, and about the profound importance of cultural continuity, lessons that feel startlingly relevant in our own complex world. This entire exploration serves as a powerful reminder to look closer at the world immediately around us. We often assume that profound secrets are hidden in exotic locations or require advanced technology to uncover, but sometimes they are etched into the most unexpected and accessible places. A piece of glass born from a volcano, a common tool, or even the stories passed down through generations. History's greatest mysteries and most brilliant insights are often waiting in plain sight, simply asking for a more curious and respectful gaze. We would love to hear which method of encoding fascinated you the most. Was it the microscopic inscriptions hidden in plain sight, the celestial arrangements of blades, or the powerful psychological rituals? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey into the secrets etched in obsidian, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell for more adventures into historical mysteries that illuminate not just our shared past, but our collective future.